What is up, my friends, and welcome back to my kitchen here in Las Vegas. Today I am back at it again, cooking with CookCraft, and we're making the king of comfort foods, or at least one of my kings of comfort foods. We're doing a beautiful meatball, but not just any meatball. We're gonna do a Wagyu beef and Berkshire pork meatball. We're gonna serve it over a creamy polenta, and we're gonna make a homemade tomato sauce to go on top of it. It's gonna be delicious, it's gonna be comforting, it's the best thing for when the weather starts to cool down, and we're gonna get at it right now. So, I've already done a couple things. Like I said, we're doing Wagyu beef and Berkshire pork. So I've already grinded down my Wagyu beef and Berkshire pork. It's about a pound of the Wagyu and about a half a pound of the Berkshire. Don't worry if you can't find the Wagyu, you could sub. What I like to sub is, for the Wagyu part, is either short rib or brisket. Grind that down, and then for the pork, just get as high a quality pork as you can get. Berkshire is a fairly high quality pork. So I've ground that down, got a pound and a half of meat. I've also made a part of our filling. So all I've done is taken a carrot, one celery stick, 1/2 an onion, and about 4 to 5 cloves of garlic. A couple of mine were small, so depending on sizes. I've minced them down. If you're not comfortable with your knife work, then go ahead and throw this in a food processor to get it as fine as you can. I've done it by hand because I kind of like the little colors within the meatball. So we've already gotten this into a skillet, and we've just sweated it down just until the vegetables are soft and just starting to turn translucent. All right, while we are mixing together our ingredients, first off, we've got 2 pieces of bread. I'm using wheat bread. You can use any type of bread that you like. I've just cut it down into cubes, and I've got about 3/4 of a cup of milk. We're just gonna pour this over and soak our bread. So once you've got the milk in there, just pat everything down. Make sure everything's nicely covered. And then once our milk's in there, we're just gonna set this aside, let it soak. Some people call this a filler. I like to call it softening the meatball. That's what's gonna kind of give you that nice, beautiful, silky texture. So as that's soaking, let's go ahead and move along. We'll take our sweat down vegetables, get that into our bowl here. We've got about 1 cup of Parmesan cheese. I packed it in so it looks like more than a cup, but that is 1 cup of Parmesan cheese. We've got about 2 tablespoons of basil, 1 tablespoon of thyme, and 2 tablespoons of oregano. We're also gonna add 1 egg, and this will be our binder to kind of help everything stay together. Now we have all of our ingredients in our bowl, and our bread has been soaking for about 2 minutes, so you wanna try to squeeze out as much of the liquid as you can without making a huge mess. So it's okay if a little bit stays in. I just try to gently squeeze it just to try to get some of that excess off. So we'll just give it a nice gentle squeeze here. And then as we're adding it, we'll kind of break it up a little bit as it goes into the bowl. And then as we mix, obviously, we'll get more broken up and more incorporated. Don't forget any pieces in there, just give them another nice little squeeze to get out any of that moisture. And then we'll add those guys to the bowl. So now it's time to get your hands in there, break up that egg yolk right away, and then just kind of get into it. All right, so we'll go ahead and season with salt and pepper. We're not gonna use a lot of salt because Parmesan is naturally salty, so you don't wanna use a lot of salt. We will use a little bit more pepper than we do salt to give it a little bit of spice. And then we're just gonna continue mixing. You don't wanna squeeze too hard when you're doing this because you don't wanna compress those meats. You really want it to be nice and light and airy and fluffy, but you wanna make sure there's no bread pockets, right? You wanna make sure that bread is fully incorporated. All right, so if you see any pockets of, like I said, of the bread mixture kind of clumped together, make sure you spread that out. But don't be too heavy-handed with this. You just kind of want to gently move it around, gently break it up as you go. This looks pretty good from here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start making our balls. I like to make mine a little bit smaller than baseballs. I find that if you make them too big, they don't cook all the way through. If you make them too small, they overcook very easily. Like Swedish meatballs, I've never had a Swedish meatball that is cooked soft and cooked properly. So we're gonna go something around the size of that. Like you cup your hands and it should be a perfect ball. So you don't wanna work this too much. Again, we wanna keep these as soft and intact as possible. So as little as you can do to get that perfect ball, and then we'll just place it on our pan, and then we'll repeat the process through the rest of our meat. All right, we are down to our last meatball here. So we got 9 out of this one. You could go a little bit smaller if you needed to feed a few more people. I wouldn't go too much smaller than this. So I'm actually serving these for just me and my wife. So I usually serve about 3 per person. So we'll have a couple leftovers. I'll use them for meatball sandwiches tomorrow for lunch for sure. All right. These guys are done. We're going to transfer these into the fridge. I like to put them in the fridge for at least 30 minutes just so they set their shape a little bit better. That way when we go to pan fry them or pan sear them to get that nice crispy edges, they'll hold that shape. So we're gonna put them in the fridge for 30 minutes and we'll be right back to get started with our tomato sauce. Our meatballs are now resting nicely in the fridge for about 30 minutes. That gives us time to get started on our tomato sauce, and then we'll get moving on onto the polenta as well. So first thing we want to do, get the best quality canned tomatoes as you possibly can. I love canned tomatoes for tomato sauce. I very, very rarely, if ever, use fresh tomatoes for tomato sauce. There's something kind of special that happens when good quality tomatoes are canned and canned properly, and they kind of age and ripen, and you know, they just are so much better as a canned product. So we're using San Marzano tomatoes. It's my tomato of choice. It's what I go to for all tomato sauces. And we're gonna go ahead and add these. These are whole peeled tomatoes. So we're gonna add these to a bowl here. There's already some basil in this, so we're gonna use a little bit of basil, but not too much. So the key to this tomato sauce is really doing it the Italian way, and that's getting in and breaking each one of these tomatoes down by hand and really getting a feel for this sauce. You want there to be some chunks, not a lot, but you don't want this to be a food processed sauce, because a couple things happen. One, you'll change the color. It will start to be kind of a whitish tone of a red. It will fade it a little bit. And 2, you don't get those great natural chunks, right? Those little bites of tomato, those bursts of flavor. So we want this sauce to be more on the fresh side. So we're gonna do this by hand. Now this will break down a little bit more, obviously, as we're cooking it. But you shouldn't, like that's about the biggest size chunk that you wanna see, maybe even a little smaller than that. So if you feel anything bigger, just keep on working it. It will take you about 2 to 3 minutes to get through this. Now that our tomatoes have been squeezed, we can go ahead and start cooking the tomato sauce. I want this to be a fresh tasting tomato sauce, so we're not gonna cook it all day like a ragu or something like that. We want this to be pretty fresh. So we're only gonna cook it for about 30 minutes. Right now I've got my 10-inch skillet over medium heat with a little bit of olive oil in it. Now we're gonna go ahead and add our onions. And we'll season these guys up with a little bit of salt and pepper. So we're not gonna try to caramelize these. We don't want any color on the onions. We really just wanna cook them until they start to turn translucent, at which time we can start adding the remainder of our ingredients. I mean, garlic and onions, undoubtedly one of the best smells in the world. So we can go ahead and add our red wine. We're gonna add 1 cup of red wine, and we're gonna reduce this until it's almost completely gone. That means the pan is almost completely dry. Okay, our wine has reduced nicely, so we can go ahead and add our remaining ingredients. So we'll go ahead and get the tomatoes in. And now we're gonna add about a teaspoon of crushed red pepper. And then this is our little herb bundle. We've got about 2 sprigs of thyme, 2 to 3 sprigs of oregano, and 2 to 3 sprigs of basil. We just tied it off with a string of butcher's twine. Just gonna throw that right in. I just turned the heat down to low. We're gonna let this simmer for about 30 minutes. Like I said, we're doing a fresh sauce, so this isn't gonna be those really deep flavors, but it's gonna be that fresh, vibrant, kind of acidic tomato sauce. So we're gonna cook this for about 30 minutes. We'll go ahead and get started cooking off our meatballs and our polenta. All right, so I broke out my 13-inch French skillet. We're gonna get this thing ripping hot. We're gonna add a little bit of olive oil, and then we're gonna sear off our meatballs on all sides, and then we're gonna throw it in a 400-degree oven and let that cook for about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how big your meatballs are. They should just be perfectly cooked through. All right, now that our meatballs are all nice and snug in their cozy oven, we'll get started on our polenta. All right. My tomato sauce has finished, so I just moved it to the back of the stove just to let it sit there. We'll re-warm it when we need it, when we get to plating. Let's move on to our polenta. So we're gonna do a creamy polenta. Polenta is really just corn grits. So we've got 1 cup of corn grits. We've got 2 cups of water we're gonna add to our 3-quart CookCraft saucepan, and we've got 2 cups of just regular whole milk. You don't have to use whole milk if you don't want to. I like whole milk, it's what I had in the house. So we're gonna put this on the stove and bring it to a boil, and then we can start adding our grits. All right, now that our cream is at a simmer, we can go ahead and add our polenta. You wanna whisk as you add this and add it slowly. All right, the reason you want to whisk as you're adding the polenta is just to avoid clumps. Once it hits the water, it can clump up pretty fast. We've got it over low heat now, so I turn the heat down. We're gonna cook it for about 30 minutes, and then we're gonna add some Parmesan, season it with salt and pepper, and then it's almost time to eat. Oh yeah. Our meatballs look delicious. We're gonna pull these out. We still got about 15-20 minutes to go on our polenta. We're gonna rest these. We're gonna warm everything back up right before we serve them, but they smell incredible. So all we gotta do is finish up our polenta. We have about 10 minutes left on our polenta, so to heat these guys back up, what else would you think I would do? So we're gonna add these guys to our tomato sauce, and then we're just gonna put these over about a medium-low heat. We just want it to come to a little bit of a simmer, just rewarm the meatballs through, coat the meatballs in this beautiful tomato sauce, and then we can finish it up, plate it up, and eat it up. Now that our polenta is nice and creamy, we're gonna mix in 1 cup of Parmesan cheese. It's got about 2 minutes left to cook. That should be just enough time to melt the cheese and fully incorporate it. All right, guys, our polenta is finished. Our meatballs are finished. Time to plate it up and eat it. If your polenta does thicken up a little bit, just add maybe a drop or 2 of water, not a lot at a time. You want it to be creamy. You want it to kind of have a little bit of a porridge-ish consistency. All right, so let's go ahead and plate this guy up. So first thing we're gonna do is get our polenta. Nice big helping of polenta right there in the middle of the bowl, probably 2 spoonfuls. Polenta is really the base for this. I mean, the polenta is what you're gonna use to sop up all that beautiful tomato sauce, and then obviously to enjoy with the meatballs. So, about 2½ scoops of polenta. Put that out of the way. And then we're gonna throw a few meatballs right on top here. 3 nice sized meatballs. Oh yeah. Like I said, this is comfort food at its finest. All right, and then obviously we've got to get some more cheese on top. So we're gonna use some more Parmesan cheese, and then we're also gonna use some beautiful ricotta cheese, some really, really good quality ricotta cheese that I picked up. So a good bit of Parmesan right here in the middle. Make it snow Parmesan all over these meatballs. This is a good little additional salt kick right at the end, right? So that looks good, like a nice snowfield of Parmesan. Then we're gonna take our ricotta and try to get a nice quenelle out of this ricotta. Doesn't have to be perfect, obviously, right? We'll put this guy right on top. I love the way when you put the ricotta in and it starts breaking down as you eat the dish. Oh man, it's so good and creamy. It just adds another layer of texture. All right, so now we're gonna add just a few little basil leaves around just to make it pretty. All right, there we go. That is a beautiful, just heartwarming, comforting, just delicious dish. We've got the creamy polenta on bottom, our beautiful Wagyu and Berkshire pork meatballs, topped with some absolutely delicious ricotta cheese. Let's taste it. I love meatballs. I love Italian food. I kind of tend to lean towards that, and this is one of those dishes that just, I mean, it's like mama food. Oh man, it is so delicious. So you can find this recipe and so many more incredible recipes at www.cookcraftco.com. And if you're there and you need some new cookware, the holidays are coming up, use my code CHEF20 for 20% off of your entire purchase. That's it for me this time from Cooking with CookCraft. I'll see you next time when we bring you some more delicious flavors using the tri-ply stainless steel cookware from CookCraft. We'll see you then.